This week, we're joined by one of those once-in-an-era individuals, dynamic, creative, innovative. He's got one of those big picture minds. He's so ahead of the curve intellectually that between matches, he went out and earned his freaking doctorate in physical therapy from Ohio Valley Wrestling and is heard right here on the Hameen Media platform, Mondays inside the locker room. He is Dr. Manbeast, Ted McNaler. Thank you for joining us, sir.
That was a heck of an introduction. I mean, I don't know where we go from there. I mean, I think that's it. I think that's as high as we're going to go, guys. No, in all seriousness, but it takes me back to, they say, and then the bell rings and then what happens. But either way, I'm very honored and privileged to be with you gentlemen this morning. Looking forward to talking some shop. And how are you all doing this morning? I guess is the other question to ask here.
Well, I guess that big picture now going around the world of professional wrestling, a lot of shock and uncertainty as we have going on really throughout society. So, with all of that, and I know how busy you are, trying to stay busy with everything going on during this lockdown, Mr. McNaler, again, thank you for joining us here. But the Beast, for those possibly a little unfamiliar with your impressive resume, I wanted to talk a little McNaler 101. You debuted back in 2004, 2005. One of your earliest matches that I can recall was against a very recognizable name in Mikey Mondo. But it's impressive if all those early matches were for you. I wanted to dive a little bit even further back before all of that, get into the when, the where, the why. Can you tell us a little bit about your love for pro wrestling and about that transition from fanatic to star?
Well, I always loved watching wrestling on, the old Saturday morning wrestling. And I remember being enthralled with the larger than life characters. And so I get some grief from my wrestling brethren, but, you can't deny his superstardom. But I was a huge fan of the Ultimate Warrior. He was my first big wrestling hero. I really enjoyed him, and I was actually a really big fan also of Jake the Snake Roberts, mostly because he had the giant snake with him. But still, I was really enthralled and drawn towards those larger than life characters, and I was really enthralled with the old school, over the top wrestling. And I will admit that as I started to get closer to being a teenager, a age 10er, I kind of gravitated away from that to WCW once Hulk Hogan made the ship or jumped ship, and I know a bunch of the other guys jumped ship. I started watching that, but then the Attitude Era hit, and I started becoming enthralled, and it was very interesting. This is just a funny side story, and it goes to show every little thing you do in the ring does matter, because I saw a run-in on WCW by Lex Luger, and I saw him throw a punch. I saw a good foot of distance between said punch and the guy he was attempting to hit. And then the guy went down, and my thought as I think at that time I was like 12 years old, I thought, okay, WCW must be fake. WWF must be real, logic, right? And so I became enthralled with the Attitude Era, and it was around that time, unfortunately, in my personal life, my dad passed away. And if anything, it made me hold on to wrestling even tighter, and it made me feel, okay, I want to be a part of this world someday. I need to be a part of this world someday. That's what I was driven to do. And so I decided I looked up some things online in the early days of the internet back then. I saw Al Snow, of all people, had a wrestling school. It was in Lima, Ohio, and I was going to pack my bags and move. But then upon further research, I found, wait, there's a place here in my own city called Ohio Valley Wrestling, and they're actually associated with WWF at the time. And so I immediately sent him a message. I said, I'm ready to train. Let's start. And then I got a handwritten letter from Danny Davis, and it said, I'd love to have you, but you're not old enough. And so I had to wait till I was 18, graduated, and literally the week after I graduated, I started my training at OVW with my first trainer. And as you alluded to, also my first match was Mike Mondo or Mikey from the Spirit Squad. Of course, back then he was just getting his start, just a couple years behind me also. But that's how I got my start at OVW.
It's very interesting that you mentioned Al Snow's that school way back then.
Right.
In Lima, Ohio, is right up the road from me. They're kind of still running as the promotion war, Wrestle and Respect. It's still going strong. As you mentioned, that rich history. Right now, they're greatly affected by this, but they regularly run, and I've got some ties regularly interacting with some of their great stars there. So kind of that tie all comes around full circle there. as you say, you break into OVW there, not just an in-ring talent through all of that. I mean, you've worn many hats inside of the business here, Beast. You've worked, as we talked about, that in-ring talent. You've worked in an on-air, those supporting roles. You've been a part of the creative process. You've worked in the office. Can you talk about the importance of all of those experiences and the overall perspective that's given you about professional wrestling?
Well, certainly. Well, I was very driven, especially because, I've never been the biggest, most physical specimen. And I was told by a lot of these guys when I came in that, don't expect to do too much, or, and a lot of times, they'd say, okay, give this guy 2 months, give this guy 3 months. Now I was determined, just no, I'm going to be around here. I don't care what it takes. So I tried to learn literally every aspect that I could as soon as because I wasn't, allowed to wrestle right away, in part because I wasn't trained properly. And then that, I think, is a big lesson that I wish, other places would attend to, and giving people the time to, get ready before they get into the ring and wrestle in front of an audience. But I was given the opportunity to referee early on. And so I learned that aspect. And then anytime they gave me an opportunity to learn something, I took to it. So, years down the line when we started DCW, which was just, basically at OVW, they had the contract guys on the main show. And so they started a secondary show for the non-contract guys, which I was one of. And so I took on every role I could. I was great, very grateful. They allowed me and Ben Hameen and a couple other guys the opportunity just to write and produce the show. And so I did that. I commentated on the show. And anytime I've got an opportunity to do something different, I've always tried to do that. Even recently, over the last year, I've started to do ring announcing for OVW, which is something that I never had done before, but it led to an opportunity to be the ring announcer for Impact and their Sacrifice event they just had about at this time period, a month or so ago, back when we were still doing live shows. And so I'm a big believer in that you always should try to continue to add value to yourself, no matter how it is, and any aspect or opportunity you have to learn in wrestling. If you're involved in wrestling, I think, there's no reason why not to take it, because anytime I've started a new thing in wrestling, I start off sucking. And I think that's something people don't like to do. They don't like to suck, but you got to suck hard for a long time in order to get good. And I've recognized that from an early age. And so anytime I've had the opportunity to do something different or new, I just take to it. And I just know I get through that sucking period for a while, and you start getting better at it. And then you've added a new skill to your arsenal that you can then use to promote yourself and add value to other shows or companies that you're a part of.
Well, you had mentioned there, just going back a couple months in January, the Nightmare Rumble, you were pulling double duty there, ring announcing, and then you inserted yourself into that match. I got to tell you, I had the opportunity. I was in the house. Absolutely incredible show and incredible atmosphere. I'm a sucker for any kind of battle royal gimmick. If it's the Rumble style, if it's the classic over the top, whatever you can do with it. I got to say, that evening, I don't know if it was that live event experience. It was probably the best Rumble match I've ever seen put together. From the surprises, the way the match flowed. I love the little, that extra little gimmick you throw in there with the double chance opportunity. And we seen the eventual winner, come from, that avenue there. Kudos to everyone down there. I mean, from the front of the house to just the in-ring, spectacular that it is. OVW is hard to beat, especially that vibe when you're there in the arena. With OVW, you come in at a very interesting time. There's a great deal of change happening within the company. Jim Cornette he's kind of on his way out. Soon after, we see the relationship with the WWE that begins to dissolve. In many ways, this time period for OVW, then, it mirrors the current state of professional wrestling. You've got so many talents, and more so, you've got staff. They're experiencing all of these uncertainties. What was the mood back at OVW like around this time, around the WWE's withdrawal?
Yeah, so interesting you say that, because the closest thing I could relate to what's going on right now in the world with so many people losing opportunities all at once was probably back then, especially because literally right before that happened, we actually had a visit from Triple H and Shawn Michaels, who were, coming around, and it was interesting. They were like taking pictures of, well, not them, but they had people working for WWE taking pictures of the arena and everything, which, we didn't think anything of, but, they specifically told us, OVW is not going anywhere. WWE and OVW are always going to be, have this great relationship. And, we're looking to you all for the next generation of talent. And then it was within literally the next month that we got the news. And most of us found out literally via reading it online versus, getting any kind of phone call. That WWE had severed their relationship with OVW, and it was just an incredible feeling of loss, just to feel like you're part of the machine, and then all of a sudden you get discarded as we did. So it was an interesting time, and I'll say although it was, it was taken very negatively at the time, I have to say the next year or so is when I felt I really grew as a performer. And I think a lot of the other men and women that were there at the time also did, because I think, you have, again, the situation was not good, but I think in stressful and uncertain times that a lot of times people take that opportunity to step up and try to absolutely make the most out of any opportunity they can. So I'd like to say, while I wish it didn't happen, at the same time, I felt I grew as a performer more in that next year than probably I ever did at any point. And we were fortunate at the time that, again, the guys got severed along with it, decided to stick around OVW, namely one of the guys that I felt I really learned from at the time was Joey Mercury. And he was released from WWE, but he stuck around OVW for the better part of the next year. And I felt like getting a chance to be on the road with him and doing a lot of shows and seeing how he approached matches, that I learned a lot. And being around a lot of the other guys that stuck around. Rob Conway was around at the time as well. Amish Roadkill was also down there. He was also released. And so, a few of those guys that were sticking around, were helping at least run the ship at the time. And a lot of guys stepped up for the opportunity, and that's part of the reason why I think OVW is still around today, is because instead of allowing it to defeat us at the time, guys decided to step up and make the most of the opportunities that were presented.
What was it? Yeah, as we're talking about these stars that maybe had more of association with WWE, still giving back to Ohio Valley Wrestling. Through the research, it seems that one at JBL, Bradshaw, he was very influential in helping you guys get going and helping development, as he invested quite a bit inside of Derby City Wrestling DCW, correct?
So, well, it was actually Viper Fight League, which was another alternative company that Danny and JBL did pump some sponsorship money. So, yes, that did help tremendously. And then also Bruce Pritchard was a part of that Viper Fight League, where they attempted to do some mixed martial arts stuff at the Davis Arena. It was moderately successful. But yeah, that did give us another shot in the arm, at least from a financial standpoint, that helped us out there. Yeah, and JBL did, like I said, he offered the sponsorships with his what was the Mama Juana drink and his JBL energy drinks, that lineup that he was coming out with at the time. But it was nice to have those sponsorships, because that did help us out too.
Now, you've also at OVW you've had partnerships as well with Impact Wrestling, with Ring of Honor, and like so many other partnerships, they come and they go. I guess no pun intended. Can you talk about how impactful those were for the company and those eventual breakups as well?
So yeah, and that was kind of cool. Like, and I'll say that over the years, it's been neat to see. Like, I started, like you said, with Jim Cornette, and then of course he had the incident with Santino and came out. But then I got a chance to work with Paul Heyman for a while, and then Al Snow, as Paul Heyman started to do more on the main roster, Al Snow kind of took over, and so that's where I started my initial relationship with Al. Working with him just as a professional, which continues to this day. And of course, after WWE pulled out, then we got Jim Cornette. Eventually, did come back in and gave us that relationship with Ring of Honor. And that was really more of a loose relationship, in that occasionally they would use some of our guys for shows, which really it was getting some extra guys to help set up the ring and get an opportunity, but still it was cool that, he helped foster that relationship for us and give guys opportunities, as Jim Cornette. And that was kind of like, there wasn't really a big moment where everything just kind of got chopped and severed. Jim just kind of started stepping out of, his day-to-day responsibilities at OVW, and that relationship with Ring of Honor it kind of just fizzled. There wasn't really definitive, like, this is the end of it. And then Al ended up coming back, and he was with Impact at the time, and that's when we started to have more of the developmental type relationship. And we got guys to come in like Rob Terry, Jesse Goddard, Rockstar Spud, which, my heart goes out to him as well, as someone that was recently released, and a few other of the Impact guys. Sam Shaw, who's now Dexter Loomis in NXT, he came in. I'm trying to think of a few of the other Impact guys that came around. Taryn Terrell, and a couple others. But so it was cool to get a chance to mix it up, and again, I got to form some more professional relationships with some really cool people that still continue to this day, and getting a chance to work within those with those guys at that time was really cool. And again, that's one that I felt like kind of fizzled out. There really wasn't a defining moment. I think guys started to slowly just move away. And I don't know if it was an issue of Impact wasn't, paying their guys a certain amount or whatnot. I don't want to get into rumors because I really don't remember, but I know guys over time either, would eventually, stop coming to OVW, and it kind of just fizzled out also. And it was around that time that I decided that I wanted a better opportunity to fund my wrestling habit. And that's when I did go back to school and got my doctorate in physical therapy.
Very, very nice. I think it's so important that we talk about those past experiences so that we can set the table for the conversation, and really such a saddening situation that's currently unfolding, just not inside of professional wrestling, but society as a whole. But of course, specifically talking about, about these massive cuts that are happening with inside WWE. The list, it seems to grow by the hour. So I don't necessarily want to maybe, single out individuals here, but talk about it more big picture. Mr. McNaler, when this news broke, what were your initial thoughts? What were those emotions and the feelings that you were kind of taking in?
Well, I'm still processing it, to be honest with you, but I think my first reaction was just I felt bad. I felt sad for the people that had worked, so long for their childhood dream to come true, to work for the WWE and have it ripped away, especially in a situation that really wasn't under their control. And I can empathize in the sense that, while I haven't been under contract, I myself, have been furloughed during this time. And I can only hope that as things kind of start getting back to quote unquote normal, that a lot of those talents will end up, being able to get their opportunities to get their job back, or, in a weird way, and I don't want to, say by any means, it's definitely not a good thing or positive thing, but the silver lining is a lot of times, opportunities do arise from things like this. And so, you might see guys, getting to go to maybe New Japan who wanted to go and never had the opportunity. Well, now, once things get back to normal, they might get an opportunity to do that, or work for AEW or Impact or anywhere else. And, it's interesting when these things happen. Sometimes people take the opportunity to reinvent themselves and really break out. And so I'll be interested to see which of these talents take the opportunity to do that, because I think it will happen. It's just a matter of who on that list of cuts is going to take that opportunity. And already there's a couple people that I think will. I don't want to jinx it or anything, but at the same time, I absolutely think there's going to be a handful of those guys that are going to take this opportunity and take this negative situation and turn it into a positive one. And that's the part that I think I'm excited to see, because just like I said, when WWE pulled out back in 2008, we all thought it was the end of the world. There's a lot of guys that stepped up and ended up making, great opportunities after that time. So it'll be interesting to see who does step up and who does take advantage of, the opportunities to reinvent themselves, to grow, and to eventually, take their names back into the spotlight.
Well, let's go to the other side of the coin here. Let's put the suit and tie on. You've worked in the office. You've been invested with Ohio Valley. From the corporate perspective, what's the mindset? What's going on at HQ right now for WWE?
I think it literally comes down to the numbers, and that's why I encourage anyone that they get cut, to not take it personally. And you can't help but do that. But when you look at someone like Mike Chioda, that's been around for decades, and you realize that he probably was the highest paid referee they had at the time, and it's one of those things where I'm sure I could tell you, and I don't know him that close, but I've been around him enough just getting opportunities with WWE that know he's well respected and liked in that locker room. And so for him to get released, to me, seeing his name on there tells me clearly it was all finances. They were looking at their quarterly numbers, which just came out at the end of March, and seeing the economic downturn with everything going on, and no perfect timeline as far as when we're going to come out of, the global pandemic here and get back to normal. So I think it was just literally they had to make a ton of cuts. And I think, there probably was a lot of conversations of, who do we let go? Who do we keep? And I think literally it was, looking at the numbers. Okay, what are we paying? What are we doing? And so I did expect a lot of the NXT people to get cut. And actually, I'm surprised that more haven't been cut from NXT. And I hope they don't cut too many more, or really anybody if they don't have to. But I figured that guys like producers, which we did see a lot of producer cuts, and a lot of backstage roles we're going to get let go at this time. So it is unfortunate, but I can see it's straight from the numbers. The quarterly reports just came out. They had to make these cuts so that way by the time the next quarterly report comes out, it's at least not as bad as this past one, and it still might be given what's going on. But I think ultimately it just comes down to the budget and long-term future planning. You set aside so much money for marketing and for talent and whatnot, and you keep it in a bucket. And so I assume that those buckets that they've set aside for that are gone. They've drained up. And so now you got to make those cuts. And people I know were talking about how Vince McMahon took money and gave it to the super PAC to be considered an essential business. But I assume that money probably either came from another bucket or possibly even from their own personal pockets, which, when you're running a business, you try not to reach into your personal pockets if you don't have to. And I think that was just a decision that they had to make to keep the doors open. And if anything, love it or hate that decision still allowed them to keep the people employed that are still employed right now. So whether or not you can argue it was the right decision or not, but they're still having people under contract that are still employed that otherwise may not have been employed if they weren't allowed to continue to run right now.
Well, can you talk? You're talking about the different types of employment positions, and I think this is something that maybe a lot of fans out there that they don't really have a sound grasp on. Can you talk about the difference in those contracts between the in-ring talents, the trainers, the producers, and so on?
Yeah, so it is interesting, and I'll say from knowing some of the people that have worked both as talent and as producers, it is differently set up, and I don't want to. Don't quote me on everything, but I do know that from just a basic standpoint, your talent, so to speak, or more of the independent contractors versus people that are staff or producers or agents or whatnot, or trainers down in NXT, they typically are placed under your regular employment contract, like your W-2 type work. And so they get the benefits and I think they get vacation, but they basically are set up more like an employee where they get benefits and 401k and things like that. And that's also why a lot of times, like, you have these great producers that are great talent also, but oftentimes you won't see them wrestle. And I don't know, but I think in part of that is because, at the end of the day, their medical bills are being taken care of by the company and not by themselves. And as an independent contractor, that's really all on you. Now, I do believe that it still pays for like surgeries and rehab and things like that. But at the same time, those guys still don't have, they have to get their own personal health insurance versus, someone that's otherwise a staff as a trainer or producer or whatnot. They don't have to worry about that because they're taken care of by the company with those benefits. And I think that's also why you saw a lot of producers and trainers also getting cut, is because you don't take into account how much money it costs to supply benefits for people. And so that's, I think, another big reason why a lot of the producers and trainers and staff also got cut along with it.
And I think, in this big picture, obviously, so many people are focused in on the names of those stars that we recognize that have given us so much enjoyment throughout the years, have entertained the masses. But in this big picture, it looks like anywhere from 300 to 400 employees under that corporate banner of WWE, are set to be furlonged or, just released, laid off, whatever the case might be. A very saddening situation. Kind of in closing here, what kind of words of encouragement to those stars, to the employees of WWE, and more so, around indie wrestling, as we've seen shutdowns across this nation, coast to coast, and we don't know when we're going to see, the mom and pop shows return for some normalcy. What kind of words of encouragement would you give everybody?
So I would say that the opportunities that are presented in the world right now, there's really two ways that you can come out of it. You can come out ahead or you can come out behind. And there's ways you can quantify and qualify that, but basically what I'm getting at is you really can allow the situation going on right now to defeat you, or you can do whatever the hell you can to try to come out on the other side. It's certainly normal and expected, and I encourage those that are going through it to allow themselves to process the emotions that they're having right now, and allow themselves in a weird way to grieve. I mean, this is a significant feeling of loss here. I mean, and as such, I'd expect people to be that are affected by it to be very emotionally taken aback by it. But after those feelings have been allowed to process, I would encourage people to keep putting themselves out there. There's more eyes on the internet than ever before. Take this opportunity to reinvent your character, to make connections with people maybe you haven't talked to in a while, or new connections and new networking opportunities. So when things get back to normal, you're getting opportunities either back with WWE or with another big company, whether it be AEW or Impact or Ring of Honor or New Japan or what have you. And know that, everything in life is cyclical. It all comes full circle. And, there's times when we can look back and things have been very bleak and down. And those are a lot of times when people rise from the ashes and take opportunities to reinvent themselves and create a new chapter in their career maybe they didn't even think was possible, and achieve new heights they never thought it was possible. So know that it's not over. You can allow it to defeat you, or you can rise from the ashes and you can make the most of it. And I like to believe, given the list of people and knowing a lot of the people that unfortunately were released recently, that there's quite a few people on that list that I know for a fact can take this opportunity to take this negative situation and become far better because of it. As much as that might seem strange, I absolutely 100% believe that they can. And I know, I feel confident enough to say that I know some will absolutely do that. So as bleak as it may be, and for wrestling fans that love a lot of the people that were affected by this, just know that things are going to get better. Things are going to come around, and you may be surprised to see exactly who takes the situation to become the next really the next level, create the next level of their career, the next chapter, if you will, and create new stars that maybe we haven't really seen reach their full potential yet. And I think we're going to see a lot of these guys finally actually take this situation to reach their full potential. And from a wrestling fan standpoint, man, I can't wait to see them tear it up. I think it's going to be exciting when we finally get a chance to see these guys get back in the ring and get to go again.
Very, very well said there, sir. Well, Dr. Manbeast, Ted McNaler, thank you so much for being with us here on the Hot Tag WrestleCast. Can you let the listeners know what exciting projects, what else you got going on?
Well, sure. Well, as I said, I was recently furloughed myself. So, and again, I could absolutely take it as a negative. It is a negative. Let's just call a spade. But I'm trying to take the opportunity to, one, I'm very honored and privileged to be part of the Hameen Media Group. So excited to be doing the Monday Locker Room, of course. I've been taking the opportunity to do some Zoom calls with some of my former OVW brethren. So hopefully I'll have a chance to get some interviews in with some people that fans want to see and some of your listeners would like to see. In fact, if anyone has any one particular from the old OVW days they'd like me to chat with, I'm still in contact with a lot of these guys. So just let me know. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Ted the Manbeast. Of course, on Facebook at Ted McNaler. And I'll hopefully be having my own personal Twitch page I'm going to be putting together over the weekend. And so, continue to follow me on any of these social media platforms. And, I'm excited that, although, again, it's not a great situation, I'm excited to take advantage of the opportunities right now and hopefully produce some great content that's going to be entertaining and fun for your listeners and viewers to watch. So I'm just excited to be a part of the team here and looking forward to the projects that I'm going to have coming down the pipeline. So stay tuned, and we'll see what happens.
But thank you again, sir. We'll be right back with more of the Hot Tag WrestleCast after a big word from Big Ray and Broasters Coffee.
Yeah.